Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Cambio. I'm one of the co-chairs of the California Lawyers Association's Health and Wellness Committee. And it's our mission to try and uh, present interesting and diverse programming to help make our members healthier. A lot of us don't take the time to take care of ourselves, well, because we're taking care of our clients. So we make it our mission to try to help on that. I wanted to let you all know that we're recording today and we will take questions and answers after about 45 minutes into the program. And so put your questions in the little Q&A box. As the program goes, we're going to hold all those questions till the end. But at the end, we'll read those questions, and time permitting, Dr. Hammond will provide us with his answers. The other issue I want to make people aware of is that our committee is very diverse, and we'll start taking applications September 1st, and the application process ends on October 31st. And we encourage everybody who is interested in the topic and trying to make attorneys healthier to consider serving on our committee and helping present ideas for programming just like today. And that brings me to one of our committee members, Gary Letourneau. He's been on our committee for many years. He is passionate about our topic today, and I'd like to kind of turn things over to Gary to introduce our guest. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Paul. Let me say this. As Paul said, I'm rather concerned about America's health. We have the lowest life expectancy of all industrialized nations in the world, and we have the highest healthcare costs. And you might say, how could that possibly be? Well, hey, I was an FBI agent for 25 years, so to me it was pretty easy to figure out. And the answer really is medical doctors, generally speaking, are not trained to make people healthy. They're trained to treat the symptoms of chronic disease. They do not get nutritional science in medical school. So as a result, I mean, that's one of the worst tragedies, it seems to me, in our society. So on this topic, I went to Mindy Kirschbaum, who is involved with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and Dr. Hammond is a member of that at the Barnard Medical Center in Washington, D.C. Mindy has provided many outstanding speakers for us over the years. She's done an outstanding job. In fact, I think she registered for this. Hopefully, she's with us. And when I contacted her, I asked her for a recommendation. And there's a long list of MDs, PhDs in the Physicians Committee, and she recommended Dr. Hammond. So I went to contact him, and I discussed, first of all, I really, really enjoyed meeting him. In fact, he's a pleasure. He's a very nice person, very smart, and he he has done a great job in terms of responsible medicine. So we're thrilled to have him today. But when I talked about the programs he presents, which are numerous, he mentioned this one, the National Geographic's program about the blue zones. And we've never had one, so I thought, well, hey, let's go for it. We can always do something different, perhaps in the future. And so I give you Dr. Mark Hammond, and thank you, sir, for being here. It's a pleasure having you, and we look forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Gary. I really appreciate the kind introduction. And Paul, Mindy, if you're watching, thank you for the referral. This is a really great audience for me to discuss. Just a quick bio on me so you kind of know who's talking to you today. I've been in practice. This is my 40th year in practice of internal medicine. In mostly in the Memphis areas, which is where I trained. I went to college at Rhodes College in Memphis, and the University of Tennessee Medical Center is in Memphis. Did my internal medicine training there, and in 1986, I started private practice. Over a period of years, that evolved into what I was now frequently termed a hospitalist, which is kind of like the general practitioner of the hospital. In other words, you're kind of like the quarterback of hospital care. And I came upon that. I said goodbye to my office practice in the early 1990s, and subsequently started an independent hospitalist group, Inpatient Physicians of the Mid-South, which now has, I think we have about 25 physicians. We cover 4 hospitals, many long-term care and rehabilitation hospitals in the Memphis and Shelby County area. So obviously I was exposed to a lot of what I would call rescue medicine. And we're very good at that in the United States. If you have a heart attack or a stroke, or you need immediate care to save your life, this is the place to get it done. Unfortunately, as Gary alluded to, our management of chronic disease is not only lacking, but it is among the worst in the world. And there's many reasons for that, which we'll get into. Currently, I'm now in Fairhope, Alabama. You might ask, how did I arrive here? I would say this: my wife and I looked at many different places to retire, and I had this image of retiring, which has morphed into a second life to my career once I found the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine and other authors such as Caldwell Esselstyn, Colin Campbell. Some of you may be familiar with these gentlemen, and Michael Greger, who wrote How Not to Die and has subsequently written several books since then, is just an incredible speaker. So we ended up here because of grandkids. What else, right? I probably would have been a fellow Californian, and if it just been up to me and to my wife and I, because we really she lived in California for a while, and we were actually looking there, and we looked in the eyes of our grandkids and decided that that was the reason we would be here. So I've been here 4 years. I'm now an adjunct professor, a volunteer adjunct professor in what we call at the medical school here, the Program of Integrative Health and Wellness, which sounds like a really good thing, and it really is. Gary's right in the landscape of medical training that you don't receive nutritional education in medicine, and I certainly didn't. That is gradually changing. I must share with you guys the meeting last week, which is the annual International Conference on Nutrition and Medicine in Washington, D.C., sponsored by Dr. Neil Barnard, the Barnard Medical Center, and the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. It's put on every August. It's just the best. This past one was the best medical conference I've ever been to. We had Dean Ornish, we had Michael Greger, Chris Gardner, the researcher at Stanford, who just recently did the documentary and was on the panel for food choices. And so it was just an absolutely incredible experience. And we also, the Physicians Committee, members of the President's Council, sponsored some medical students, and we had 17 medical students that were on full scholarship there. And you could just see the passion and the excitement that they had, because as I talked to them and I tried to explain, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Jungian psychiatry or psychology, but I always was attracted to Carl Jung, and it really influenced me many years ago. But there are certain archetypes, and a lot of people who go into medicine kind of go into it as thinking that we're there because we have the healer archetype. And that's really what most people who enter into medicine really do have the heart of being a healer. But if you're familiar with Jungian psychology, there's another archetype called a rescuer. And that's typically what you fall into in medicine, because you're typically rescuing people, but you're not empowering them. to create a better health environment. So with all of that being said, my journey into healthy nutrition and healthy nutritional science really kind of began with the Blue Zones. You may not be aware, but the original Blue Zones book and documentary is now 17 years old. It initially was a National Geographic documentary. There's a documentary, of course, on Netflix now that's gotten a lot of publicity. I kind of look at the Blue Zones as the front door to a big mansion. And to me, it's a segue. It's a way for people to understand in a very simple way how it is to live this life and not only have a longer lifespan, but have a longer health span, which is really what I think we all want, is whatever years we have here, to be productive, to be happy, to be connected, to feel like that our life means something. And the Blue Zones wisdom, while it's an observational study, really opened the door for me to many other rooms in this beautiful mansion that have changed my life, changed the life of my family, and hopefully some of the patients that I've seen over the last few years. So with all that being said, the title of this, Lessons from the Blue Zones Where People Forget to Die. And I think that's a great title, because if you listen and read what Dan Buettner, the author, says in his book, that people in the Blue Zones don't really think about longevity. It just happens. It's a natural consequence of their lifestyle. And so there's a lot of lessons we can learn from them. And I'm going to go into some of those today and hopefully keep this, again, I remember Albert Einstein once famously said, if you can't simply explain your topic, you don't understand it well enough. And so hopefully I understand this well enough to not use a lot of medical jargon. I joke with people sometimes that it's said that you learn 30,000 new words in medical school. And I joke that, well, as long as those don't replace the words that you need to communicate what those 30,000 words mean, you really need to be talking plain. And the beauty of lifestyle medicine is that it's distilled down to things that I think we all kind of know intuitively, and the Blue Zones really hits on that. I love this picture. I always share this because this was the most inspirational picture of my childhood. This was taken when I was 11 years old from Apollo 8. And I guess in hindsight, it showed me that I live in a Blue Zone, that we were meant to live in a Blue Zone. And I will get into some of the environmental aspects of what we do, because that's also important as well. But I just love looking at this picture. So it's always going to be part of this Blue Zones PowerPoint that turned 3 astronauts who were the most scientific people on the planet into little kids when they saw this. So where are the 5 Blue Zones? And you'll be happy to know you're right on top of one of them. And that actual Blue Zone in Loma Linda, California, has by far the most science behind it of any of the other Blue Zones. We can talk all day and night about Okinawa in Japan, Icaria, Greece, Sardinia in Italy, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, which I've been blessed to go to twice, and Loma Linda, which I've never been to, but I'd love to go. The first 4, you could say we can learn a lot from them, but are we really going to all give up our cars? Are we really going to get all of our food from our gardens? Are we really going to be, a rural society again? Of course, the answer to that is no. But there's a lot of lessons from those Blue Zones that can teach us about personal relationships and getting away from electronics a bit. So there are lessons there. But Loma Linda proves that this lifestyle is doable in the United States. So getting into some of what Gary's talking about, I'm gonna dovetail right on top of what he said about this and give you some data that should shock the consciousness. These are life expectancy of our comparable countries, and you can see that dip that occurs around 2020 does have to do somewhat with the pandemic. You may be aware that we handle the pandemic much worse than other countries. In hindsight now, we thought that COPD was the biggest risk for death from COVID-19, but actually type 2 diabetes actually is more likely than not a bigger factor in that. So we're losing ground to our comparable country, and so we have to dive into why. So why do we need the blue zones? I think it's pretty obvious. This is an interesting graph that starts in 1950, ends in 2020, and shows that we had a ranking of 13th, which isn't great in 1950, but we dropped to 53rd in 2020. I think if you can look at all the ones in the middle, kind of treaded water for a little bit, but the green line is always fascinating to me, that the defeated in World War II, Japan, went from 45th to 3rd over the next 70 years, which a lot of that has to do with their diet. U.S. life expectancy at birth, and this is a graph I really like to show, particularly to my brothers and sisters in the South, and you'll see why this is so important. African Americans live about, and Native Americans even worse. So Native Americans typically live a full more than a decade less than a Caucasian at birth in the United States, and African Americans are somewhere in the middle, about somewhere around 5 to 6 years less. That tends to be exacerbated in the South, which, as you can see, you guys are a lot healthier than we are. You look at California, you look at Alabama, the darker color you are, the healthier you are, and the lighter the color, the worse you are. And this comes to no surprise to anybody who's really paid any attention to this, that right now Alabama ranks 46th where I'm living now. My home state of Tennessee is a little bit better, but not much. So this is why we need blue zones, and we need them even more desperately here in the South than anywhere. As Gary also alluded to, or how much we spend, this is the amount of money spent on every man, woman, and child in this country. And actually, this slide's a few years old now. I think we're north of $13,000 now. Averages of the G7 and other industrialized countries is about half that. Interestingly, you can look at Costa Rica. They're about a tenth of this. So they're spending about 10 cents on the dollar. And if you look at some other countries, you'd never believe, but people who born today in Cuba, Iran, Colombia have roughly the same life expectancy as the average American has. You may ask yourself why. Most of you guys, I'm sure, are well educated and you know the reasons for it. That's it right there on that slide. I won't go into any further detail, but maybe give you a couple of pictures to show you where the money is. And that's one picture where the money is. All the ads that you see enticing us to eat all the things that we shouldn't be eating that are highly addictive. And then follow that up with the commercial where I have a little bit of diabetes, but I manage it well with Jardians. We can see where the money is. It doesn't take a degree of higher education to figure out where we're spending our money. So kind of the bad news out of the way a little bit. I will say this just before I forget it, as far as good news. At my ICNM conference, just the International Conference for Nutrition and Medicine this past week, the keynote address was given by Dr. Bobby McCullough, who is the incoming president of the American Medical Association. Yes, you heard that right. One of the speakers, Ken Williams, is a former president of the American College of Cardiology. You may know Chris Gardner from Stanford, a well-respected researcher. In the last 5 years, the evidence is piling up so heavily that supports all the things that the Blue Zones brought to bear 17 years ago. This is entering mainstream medicine. Now, the same headwinds are still there. Big money, big pharma, and maybe even more than that, big food. The meat, dairy, egg industries are heavily funded and have the ear and the pockets of many, many politicians. So I'll put that warning out there. That's all the bad news for now. Let's get into some of the good stuff. So this actually is a 9-point, very simple sort of graph that Dan Buettner initially put out on what it means to what is the common thread of the 9 pillars of the blue zones that he identified throughout the world. And you'll see a little bit of this needs to be updated. The wine at 5 actually comes from the Sardinians, who love their red Canonica wine. And yes, they do drink a fair amount of it. This is before some of the evidence came to bear on cancers, particularly breast cancer, and the increased risk of really any alcohol consumption. There's kind of a mixed bag to it now. If I'd say this, if you don't drink, don't start. If you do drink, try to limit it to a smaller amount and drink the darkest red wine you can find. Pinot Noir is a good one. If you can find Sardinian Canonica wine, good luck. But I would that's the only quibble I would have with this. The rest of it, plant slant. And that sounds kind of timid, but if you look at all the blue zones, most of the blue zones eat probably 1 serving of meat a week, and it's about the size, as Dan Buettner says, of a deck of cards. It's typically done in celebration, so it's not a daily habit of any of the blue zones. And we'll get into a little bit more of Loma Linda in just a few minutes. The 80% rule means the actual term for that in Okinawa is harahachivu. That means when you feel and you're sitting down to a meal and you're eating mindfully, hopefully, and not gobbling it down between clients, you're paying attention to what you eat, you're appreciating it. When you feel saturated about 80%, it's time to stop. Pretty common sense wisdom. Move naturally, that kind of goes without saying. The right tribe, putting loved ones first in a sense of belonging. These seem like softer social science things, but they really do matter. These things connect because, the more you conceive of the body as a holistic creation, if you will, our need to feel belonged, our need to have loved ones, our need to feel like we're in the right tribe. I can tell you one thing for sure. I was in my right tribe last week with close to 1,000 people of like mind, with a big heart, who want to do good in the world, who want to see the world do better, who want to see the country be healthier, and are just doing it out of the goodness of their heart. I'm telling you, there is an incredible power behind that. So I felt very belong icon on here. I felt like I belonged last week, like I never had before. Downshifting, very important. That can be a day at the beach. It can be learning to do yoga. I really, in my personal journey, give yoga a lot of credit. I started doing yoga in my 50s, and it just, for those of you who've done yoga, you kind of know it changes your perspective a little bit. And finding purpose in life, I feel like I have it now. I told my partners a decade ago that if I could ever do what I'm doing now for free, I would do it. And I'm living up to that promise because I feel the purpose. So eat wisely from the garden. Whole food, plant-based is the emphasis of the blue zones. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, beans, whole grains. If it grows in the ground, eat it. Herbs, season with herbs. Try to leave the butter off and just and adopt a whole new way of eating. And I'll say this, and the Physicians Committee has been on the forefront of this, of creating food for life instructors all over the country. And you've got a bunch of them in California who are really teaching how to prepare simple chef-crafted meals that taste incredible and fill you up, not only mentally, but also emotionally in a way. Sardinian red wine, we've already discussed that. I put a question mark by that. there are a little bit of subtle differences in each blue zone. And the Adventist, we will talk about them because that's where a lot of the Western science comes about, believe it or not. A very immaculate study on the Adventist in Loma Linda, California. The great thing about the Adventist, and pardon me, I'm going to take a sip of water. The great thing about the Adventists is that their lifestyles are they're genetically homogeneous. Their lifestyles are very similar. And there's one variable in their lifestyle, and that's their diet. If you're aware of their religious rationale, is they take the first chapter of Genesis where it says, I give you all seed-bearing plants to use as food, and you shall eat in leafy greens for all creatures that crawl on the earth. That's a literal interpretation for Adventists, and so many of them adopt that as their goal. Interestingly, our culture in the United States is so strong that last time I checked this number, about half of all Adventists are actual omnivores, meaning they eat pretty much everything. They tend to be a lot healthier omnivores. They're not fast food eaters, but they do eat some meat. Some of the Adventists are semi-vegetarian. Some of them only eat fish, which are the pescos there, as you see on this graph. The lacto-ovos eat dairy, but are plant-based otherwise. And then the total vegetarian, the total plant-based eaters. And you can see that in type 2 diabetes, as you go up the ladder from total vegetarian to non-vegetarian, you take on about a 4-fold increase in type 2 diabetes. And you might go, wait a minute, there's a lot of sugar, right? We're not even talking about sugar. Isn't diabetes a disease? Isn't type 2 diabetes a disease of sugar? No, it is not. It is a disease of fat metabolism and insulin resistance. It's completely different from type 1 diabetes. So this graph shows you right there that as you start adding animal products to the diet, you start taking on more risk of type 2 diabetes. And this is a similar graph showing pretty much the same thing, a stair-step relationship. Same thing with hypertension. It's almost the same percentage at each level. It's fascinating to look at this because there's really 2 markers of chronic disease. You can't find 2 better markers of chronic disease in the United States than hypertension and diabetes, right? It drives a lot of the cardiovascular disease, and even cancer is related to insulin resistance. So exercise, we all know that exercise is good. What's the magic number? There's actually been some recent data that shows that the super exercisers, the ones that are in the gym and the marathoners, you know, there is a bit of a law of diminishing returns as you go into beyond about 90 minutes a day. The sweet spot is probably somewhere around 60 to 90 minutes a day if you can do it, a moderate intensity. I also recommend resistance training, especially as we get older, to make sure that that muscle mass stays healthy, and that we don't lose muscle mass as we get older, which is a natural tendency of aging. And you can see exercise pattern also affecting cancer and cardiovascular mortality. To just cut to the chase here, if you're regularly active, in other words, 150 minutes of moderate activity a week, you're reducing your cancer risk by about 1/3 and your cardiovascular risk by almost 1/2. So do behavioral factors matter? You betcha they do. So attitudes of selfishness produce disease, believe it or not. And I've seen this over and over again. There's a hormonal change that goes on in the body. I'm not going to read all these things because it depresses me every time I read them, but negative emotions cause, really, in my view, they kind of cause us to make bad decisions. In a way, they sometimes are the bottom of the pyramid. If we're feeling some of these things, and we're all human. We've all been lonely. There's times when we've been self-centered. And those kinds of behaviors, and we want to get revenge on somebody who's done us wrong. Those emotions are you know, they shouldn't be judged, but they do lead to negative behaviors. And some of those negative behaviors are heading to the fast food aisle at McDonald's. So what are Blue Zone's priorities? Interestingly, family and faith are important in these. I'll mention this because I think this is one of the actual weaknesses of the blue zones, is that Dan Buettner has famously said on several occasions, I've heard him quoted on this, that in his research in the blue zones, that people who attend regular services of faith, regardless of the religion, 4 times or more a month, have a 4 to 14 year increased life expectancy based on that. Now, some of that may be just you're healthy enough to go to church service. It's sort of an association. But I'll say this, the most regular attenders of church, probably other than the state of Utah, but if you look and research this, and I've done that, Mississippi and Alabama are right at the top, and that is driven by African Americans. And if you look at it, it seems like the African Americans in the South have almost reverse engineered blue zones, obviously not intentionally, but it does cause us to scratch our heads and go, what's going on here? Why is this happening? And I think there's a really good reason for it, because these are largely communities where there's food deserts, where there's access issues and other things, but some of it does revolve around diet for sure. Community is prioritized over self. The common good is important. Getting back to getting together for what brings about the common good. That is extremely important in blue zones. Spending time in nature, spending time with each other. We've kind of hit on that a little bit. And spending time away from these electronics, which tie us all down and which are great tools, but can be health problems if we let them. So this is a nice graph kind of showing 3 different blue zones and what is the overlap of 3 different ones. So you take Italy and Okinawa and Loma Linda and kind of look at what's the big overlap. So family being important, obviously not smoking, having a plant-heavy diet, constant moderate physical activity, social engagement, and beans, legumes. They're eaten in all the blue zones. It's a staple. And people always ask me, where do you get your protein? Well, I believe me, I get way more protein than I'll ever need, and it is a complete protein. So a little bit on the environment here, and then we're getting close, hopefully, to where we can, I purposely always leave plenty of time for questions because I'm always learning. It's a two-way street here, right? But I think we need to step back and go, where is our agriculture? Where is our habitable land being, where is the agriculture? And so if you look at this graph, only 29% of the earth is actual earth. The rest is ocean. Of that, 71% is habitable. And of the habitable, about half of that is what we call agriculture. Almost 80% of our agriculture is designed for livestock and for feeding livestock. So you might ask, well, where is the global calorie supply? Where do people get their calories? And so 83% of people on the face of the earth get their calories from plants, and roughly 18% get their calories from animal sources. This obviously is a cognitive split apart. How is this possible and why? And you look at this and you go, this isn't sustainable. First of all, the earth is not sustainable. And I look at it also as an ethical issue. If we took half of the corn and soy that is fed livestock and fed it to people around the world who didn't have enough to eat, we could solve global hunger in a snap of a finger. So it's an ethical issue. It's an environmental issue. If you look at what's being done to rainforests to make way for more livestock, we're headed clearly in the wrong direction when it comes to global land use for food production. And you might ask, well, yes, this has been out for several years about every bite of food you eat has impact on your carbon footprint. So you might expect, because of methane and because of environmental issues, I'm not an environmental scientist. Some of you may know more about this than I know. But you guys are in California. You clearly are aware of environmental change, and I'm 10 miles from the Gulf of Mexico, so you know I'm aware of the risk of what's happening right in front of our eyes. And people don't understand, you know, this is never talked about much on Earth Day. And if you'll go back to one of my earlier slides, the shot of Earth from the moon, that was the actual stimulus for Earth Day. In 1970, Earth Day began as a direct result of people actually seeing what the Earth looked like from space. And people don't understand, but you can substantially reduce your carbon footprint by changing your diet. And this is some food for thought. Converting one meal a week has the equivalent of saving driving about 1,160 miles. So if you're eating one meal a day that includes meat, and you cut that out, your carbon footprint over a year will drop about 8,000 miles worth of driving your car. And I know you guys in California are probably more aware of our future water supply and what that's going to look like. And it may interest you to know that every pound of ground beef requires roughly about 2,000 gallons of water to produce. We've already mentioned about the split apart on how much the world's agriculture goes to our animals. So I want to just briefly conclude with what the Blue Zones has evolved into now. And so there is now, after the original Blue Zones came out, there is bluezones.com. And so there is now a movement. There's about 70 communities, last time I checked, around the United States that have adopted the Blue Zones mantra. You can go to bluezones.com and see where they are and what is involved in it. But just a couple of examples. Fort Worth, believe it or not, is one of the communities that did this, and they moved way up on their health rankings. I love to use Albert Lea, Minnesota, because they were actually the first town in the United States to adopt a Blue Zones initiative. I think it's around 2009. I've talked to their leaders up there, and they are so on fire with what this has done for their town. It has absolutely transformed their town. And so now their mayor, their city council, and this is a fairly suburban area. You might wonder why Albert Lea, Minnesota. They're within a couple of hours, I think, of Mayo. And of course, we all know Mayo is probably, if not the number one, but certainly a preeminent center of academic excellence in medicine. So what's happened in Albert Lea, Minnesota over the last decade? They're reducing their annual healthcare expenditures by about $8.5 million. They're reducing their healthcare claims by 49%. This is data from Blue Zones. So there's no way for me to independently verify this, but I think that the people in Blue Zones were confirming this to me when I talked to them, that they've added almost 3 years of life expectancy in a decade. And to do that on an epidemiological scale is really heroic. So this is my final slide, and this is kind of a local thing that I show to all my folks here. One of my passions here is Africatown. If any of you, if you have Netflix and you've seen all the food documentaries, I would really encourage you to look at the documentary called Descendant. I won't get into it too much, but it's about the raising of the slave ship Clotilda and the formation of a small African-American community here after the war, after the Civil War, that still exists today, that has obviously been blighted by a lot of environmental pollution and poverty. There is a movement after this documentary came out and got a big run on Netflix, that there's some momentum going here, and there's some really passionate people over there who really want to restore African American health and get back to their cultural foods, which were Blue Zonesy type foods. They certainly weren't fast foods, and there's many obstacles, but I'm really hopeful that the Blue Zones and other nonprofits will put their heads, their minds, and their hearts into communities like this, because I can tell you, and I'm not making a political statement here, obviously people of color in communities like Africatown, at least for the foreseeable future, are not likely to see government grants. They're likely not to see university grants. So we really need all people of big hearts and maybe some big pocketbooks in there too, who can step in and fill the void where we really need blue zones in this country more than anybody else. I've put my email on here, and I'm always happy to talk to anybody who's got ideas or wants to grow this idea. We at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine believe in this. There's been an initiative to Native Americans, the Navajo culture, and the leader of the Navajo Nation actually gave one of the keynote addresses at last year's conference in DC. A good friend of mine, Angelia Dickinson, who is a Food for Life instructor in Mobile near Africatown, gave us a talk this year that was one of the most popular. So there is a real heart to see this through, that we somehow maybe at some point can partner with Blue Zones and do a real deep dive to put this as, and really get some energy behind this so that our most vulnerable people in society are helped. And so with that, I think I'm done, and I'll turn it back over to you, Gary.
Thank you very much. That was phenomenal, phenomenal. Paul, what happened to the slides?
I think he was done with his presentation, so the slides go off the screen. So
They were
there you
never.
go.
Sorry.
Yeah, leave up your information there.
Thank you.
We don't have any questions in the question and answer, but you know what comes to mind? Wait, so someone asked, did we get a copy of this program? So you don't get a copy of the program, but this program is recorded. It'll be on California Lawyers Association's YouTube page, a YouTube channel, along with a lot of our other programming. So if you found this program interesting, I invite you to kind of browse around and see some of the other programs that we have on there. Okay, the questions have now started to roll in, so let me get to them. This one says, I love the idea of a plant-based diet, but I'm concerned that I won't get enough protein. How can I reconcile that? That's a common question. People feel they can't get enough protein from plant-based diet. So Dr. Hammond?
Gary's laughing. I'm smiling because I love the question, because it's, you know, people need to hear this. And it is what you're hearing is propaganda from the meat and dairy industry is what you're hearing. There are many plants that have complete amino acids in them. My grandkids, there's always wisdom from grandkids, right? I got a coffee mug for my birthday this year that had the Webster's pronunciation of vegan, and the definition of vegan is explaining like 20 times a day where you get your protein. I love that coffee mug. It's my favorite coffee mug, and I hope I'll drink coffee and tea out of that the rest of my life. By the way, coffee and tea are approved beverages for attorneys that need those two pick-me-ups. But the answer to the question is, you know, animal protein, if it were just the protein by itself, now there's some evidence that animal protein causes an inflammatory reaction in the body by itself, independent of the fat that's coming with it. But you look at any epidemiological study, you can go to Framingham, you can go to the Nurses' Health Study, you can go to the UK Biobank. Look at a meta-analysis that came out in the Lancet just several months ago that looked at over 2 million people. And the two food groups that were most clearly linked with type 2 diabetes, only two food groups, were meat and dairy. So we've been brainwashed because of about the only good thing that can be offered by the meat and dairy industry is that their products contain protein. Okay, so what I would say is there are things like quinoa. Beans are such a huge source of protein, and they have dietary fiber, and they are anti-inflammatory foods. There's just across the board, there's so many reasons to adopt plant-based sources of protein, and we're fed a line about how much protein we really do need. For most of us, this will vary a couple of percentage points each way, but about 1 gram per kilogram is enough for most of us. As you get older, and I do a lot of weight training and resistance training to try to maintain muscle mass, maybe 1.2. So to put that in the English system, 90 to 100 grams, I can tell you I get 40 for breakfast just by eating chia seeds, flax seeds in my oats, and there's just so many different ways. And plants have protein too. You don't know this, but whole food plant-based foods contain a ton of protein. So it does bring up one point about eating a wholly plant-based diet, is that the soils have been largely eradicated of vitamin B12. So of all the micronutrients, I would say you certainly should supplement, and I would recommend a good multivitamin that contains all the B vitamins just to be sure. But there's a lot of omnivores that get B12 deficient. It's really not as much intake as it is absorption. So that is the one of the caveats on supplements. Vitamin D is another good one especially if you're not in California getting a lot of sun. But other than that, the data gets a little bit dicier on that. People ask me about turmeric supplements and things like that, and I think it's best to just get it from the natural source. But I hope that answers your question about protein. And Gary, feel free to dovetail onto that.
Your explanation was phenomenal. Thank you.
All right. So next question. As you mentioned, our diet culture is controlled by large food crops, big pharma, big AG, special interest groups, lobbyists. What can we do to influence our community, schools, and local politicians to make these necessary changes? Does you have any advice for us?
And I'm hitting a lot of headwind. You can imagine how hard that is in Alabama. You know what? One of the allies that I picked up early on that have probably been my most passionate people. They bring the most people to my Blue Zones talk. We have a teaching kitchen actually at the medical school, believe it or not, and we have events with chef-inspired meals where everybody, a group of 20 or 25 people, gather together and chop and dice and cook. It's really remarkable when you see this, but I would just say, bringing people together to cook healthy food is certainly the way to go. Bring the question by me again. I might have gotten sidetracked. Sometimes I get off on a tangent.
Just any advice on how we can affect politicians, local,
Yeah, and then part of that segues into from the teaching kitchen. Obviously, we have gotten local support for that. But the Master Gardeners was the one group that really got it, so if you've got a local group of gardeners, especially the Master Gardeners that have to do a lot of continuing education, they know the answers in the soil. They really do. So you have to kind of think outside the box a little bit. The Physicians Committee has been very supportive in some of our school initiatives, and Angelia Dickinson, my friend up in Mobile, is very active teaching her healthy snack program through her nonprofit there. But it is a grassroots movement. It's not going to happen any other way. I had a discussion about this years ago with Michael Greger going, how do we get this message out there? And it's just one person at a time. Now, having said that, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, based in Washington, D.C., for several reasons. And Mindy, who referred me to this group, is a very talented attorney. We have Andrew Bonovo and some of the other wonderful attorneys who work at the Physicians Committee are constantly knocking on doors, shaking hands. We are doing our bed level best to change the narrative in Washington, D.C. As far as locally, boy, you guys have a great resource in Loma Linda, California. I would visit and just talk to community leaders there. They're going to be able to tell you a lot more about how to do that than I can.
Yeah, if I could just add, can you hear me?
Yes.
The challenge is the meat dairy industries are powerful because they have a great deal of money, and frankly, they're buying off politicians. And all these messages that are being sent, people believe, and it's very tragic. And the answer is you've got to become educated, as we're trying to do here with our committee.
Yes, and thank you for that, Gary. And I'll piggyback onto that. That there's in front of Congress right now, there's a what's called a whole milk bill, where a number of politicians with a lot of influence from the dairy industry are lobbying both the House and the Senate to pass the Healthy Kids, I forget the name of it, but it's the whole milk bill. And for those of you who don't know, the school lunches have actually not served whole milk in quite a while. So the physicians committee got real smart because you guys are smarter than I am. You know what to do in a situation like this. You know you're probably not going to be able to overcome the money. So what do? You realize that plant-based milks can't be served right now unless the child comes to the school with a note saying that there's a medical reason why they can't drink whole milk. And so what the physicians committee is attempting to do is to say, okay, let's add to this bill that we are giving parents the choice to have soy milk, almond milk on their child's menu. And so what a genius that is. It's like, it's like most genius initiatives, it's a very simple idea, but we're hopeful that that we're not going to require kids to have a note from their doctor anymore if they want a soy milk, which by the way is so healthy. I consume a lot of soy these days. That is another place where I get a lot of protein.
Right. Excellent, excellent. So one person asked, what's your thoughts on nuts? Some practitioners in the area pen nuts as a protein source.
Correct. And so a lot of recent evidence about heart disease and nuts. So that's where I would start, since 50% of us are going to die from heart disease. That's probably a pretty good place to start as a number one killer. And study after study has shown that increasing your amount of daily nut intake improves your cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. Now, the caveat of that is if you're fighting obesity, it's a very calorie dense food. I mean, you're not supposed to give anecdotal evidence, but I'll share a personal story with that. I started eating this way about roughly 10 years ago, and I love nuts. It's my favorite food in the world. I've hit a BMI of around 23. I'm 5'10" and a half, 5'11". I was about 162 now. It's the lightest I've been since I was 15 years old. I eat more food than I've ever eaten. And I have 6 canisters of nuts: pistachios, walnuts, almonds, mixed nuts, cashews, peanuts. And I eat the bejeebies out of those every day, a handful. I don't measure them. I don't care, because I know they're helping my heart. And I do work out a lot, the caveat to that. So I would say if you're really concerned about calories, which if the great part about telling patients about this is throw away your low carb nonsense, throw away your calorie counting. If you really truly eat foods in their most natural form and fill your day at least 80% and close to 100 as you can get with those foods, you're going to not have to count calories anymore.
Tragically, though, nuts and seeds are extremely high in fat. And so many people that start this, changing their diets are just way overweight. So they really, really have to be careful about nuts.
Right. And if you look at what Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn does
Yes.
at the Cleveland Clinic, and
Yes.
he's taking folks So, I mean, if you want the 100% dosage, if you want the highest dosage of whole food plant-based, you will limit nuts and seeds. I don't, but you know, Dr. Esselstyn is taking it from the Cleveland Clinic, and he has shown remarkable results with his program there of people with advanced heart disease. Oils go away, and nuts and seeds, I don't know if they go away, but they're significantly limited. But people claim that that food can also, and I tell you, I eat a lot of foods that are Caldwell Esselstyn approved that taste great. It's a different satisfaction when you eat this way, and Gary can definitely attest to this. I tell people the analogy of the donut and the healthy bowl of food. Yes, a donut still tastes great on the first bite. The second bite, not quite as good. It's sort of like a diminishing returns, kind of like a narcotic would be. It takes higher and higher dosages to achieve that first sense of, God, this is incredible. That's dopamine talking to your brain. And so you start, that's the tragedy of the Western diet, is that you're constantly chasing that dopamine, that neurotransmitter. Now, when I eat and I sit down to a bowl of healthy, plant-based foods that are seasoned so beautifully, the first bite tastes great. Does it do the dopamine thing as much as a donut? Not quite. It's close enough. It's 90% there, and I can tell you, I'll eat a whole bowl of this, and the last bite is just as pleasurable as the first bite. It's just, you're just rewiring your brain to give your body what it needs, not maybe what it wants in the moment. You know, that's some of that is maturity. We ought to know better that when we're taking a bite of a donut, it's sending a signal to our brain that's not the healthiest signal in the world.
Excellent, excellent. We have another question that says, do the blue zones avoid seed oils? And I think you were kind of touching on that.
No, they don't avoid seed oils. Seed oils are a new enemy. Yes, Caldwell Esselstyn avoids seed oils. And so if you're looking for the perfect diet, you will avoid seed oils. What do I tell folks? It's a rabbit trail. It's kind of like the analogy of you coming in with a broken femur, a broken pelvis, 10 cracked ribs, and a broken skull, and you're worried about the fractured finger. Yeah, it's a fractured bone, and seed oils should be limited as much as you can. But all the blue zones use olive oil is a biggie in most all the blue zones, and they eat a lot more olive oil than we do. I don't think that in general olive oil shortens longevity at all. Does it lengthen it? I don't think it does either. But it is certainly a good substitute for those, and it's a great transition thing. It's certainly 10 times healthier than what most Americans use. As far as other ones like cottonseed oil and some of the things you see in Hostess Twinkies, yeah, that's not a good seed oil. There's mixed data on canola oils. I wouldn't go out of my way to eat them, but if there's something in there like you're buying some toasted fava beans and you see canola oil way down on the list, I wouldn't say that's a reason not to eat it. But yeah, it's just one of those things that's getting like food dyes. You're getting a lot of rabbit trails now, and we're avoiding the things that are causing disease. And I've outlined them. If you don't know my opinion on that by now, you should. Meat, dairy, eggs, sugar, obviously processed foods, but ultra processed foods in the sense of what we all know. I mean, it doesn't take much knowledge to know that Hostess Twinkies and Little Debbie's and chocolate chip cookies are bad for you. Well, yeah, there's a lot of sugar in those things, but there's a lot of fat. And is it the dye on the M&Ms on your chocolate chip cookie that's the problem? No, that's probably not the problem, okay? We're being distracted to a certain extent.
Yeah,
And
you
I
mentioned Caldwell Esselstyn, if I could just add to that. He says no oil, no oil. He's talking about heart disease patients. If you have heart disease, read his book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease by Caldwell Esselstyn. It's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal book. The problem is a heart attack, a stroke occurs in the United States, what, every 30 seconds? people are walking around living in a fantasy world thinking they're healthy when they aren't really. And anybody who lives in the United States, as I said, we have the lowest life expectancy of any advanced country in the world. And that's what Esselstyn is really attacking right there.
Very much true. I highly recommend anything by him. So again, if you are 100% on board with this, and I found a few people out of the thousands that I've talked to that are really, really on fire with this, absolutely. Dean Ornish's work out in California mirrors that. It goes more into the lifestyle piece of daily meditation, daily walking, and community and involvement, and those things are important too. Dr. Esselstyn certainly focuses, rightfully so, on those end-stage heart patients who need the highest dosage possible. I will say this, if you adopt 90% of what I've told you today, you'll gain, I really truly believe, I don't have the science to back this statement up, but I really am firmly on the side of you will get a significant benefit from it, a huge benefit. And if you want to go all the way, Godspeed to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hammond. We're slightly over our limit today. I want to remind everybody that Dr. Hammond has a Facebook page, and you can follow him. And I follow him, and he makes posts. I don't know how often, but I see them all the time, and I try to put his interest to good use. We're very thankful to have you, Dr. Hammond. I want to remind everybody that our shows are on our YouTube channel. Please check them out. And thank you very much for attending. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, sir. Great to see you and look forward to connecting with you again. Thank
I
you.
hope so. This has been really, really enjoyable for me, and I hope it has for your members as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Hey.